So I'm gonna, without further ado, introduce our first panelist, Pierre Majoric Léger from HEC Montréal. And I'm gonna stop presenting so that Pierre can hop on here. So Pierre, if you see the present now option at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. Or you can just unmute yourself and we can start with that.
I should have tested before because my Mac tells me that there's something wrong with my sharing parameter. Is there a way that you can share my slides?
Yep. So if you start, go ahead and introduce yourself, and I'm going to grab those slides and I'll present them.
All right. Thank you so much.
Okay. No problem.
Hey. Hello, everyone. My name is Professor Pierre Majoric Léger. I'm from HEC Montreal. I'm the co-director of a UX lab at HEC Montreal called Tech Tree Lab. And I'm also the chairholder of a UX chair that is financed by ANSERC and PROM. So what I do for a living, I'm a UX researcher in the academia. So I teach UX at the we have a master's in UX at HEC Montreal, so I teach UX evaluation, and I have a very large group of grad students that I supervise, which from the UX program, but also from IT and marketing. And so my job as a living is to train the next generation of UX researcher and try to provide them as much real life experience as possible. So as a background, I'm from Polytechnique. I did my PhD there at Polytechnique. I have a postdoc from NYU, and on the right hand side you have where I've been financed. I'm also a professor at Dartmouth and at the University of Iowa. So on the second slide, a picture from my lab. Unfortunately, as everyone else, our lab, my lab is temporarily suspended. So a big part of our research right now has been turned into remote testing using some new methods that we developed at the lab. But we have a very large UX research lab at HEC Montreal. We have currently 8 rooms for the data collection, different types of rooms. Some of them are, traditional rooms like this, where with a moderator and one participant. But we also have group room. We have a living room for UX research. And soon in 2022, we'll have a new building. HEC will have a new building downtown, where we'll have 5 new rooms. So we're very proud of our infrastructure, and the goal here is to train graduates in a very nice environment with a lot of nice UX evaluation tool. One of the originality of our lab is the use of neuroscience as a way to measure automatic and unconscious behavior reaction of users in interaction with all sorts of technology. The goal of the presentation today is not to go in that in those details, but if eventually you have questions about that, I can answer. I think the main part of the conversation today is to share our view on how to bring industry inside university to train competency with real life case. So on the next slide, if you would like to turn, please. Thank you so much. We have a broad range of business partner from the industry where we co-finance research with a range of organizations such as Desjardins, Vidéotron, Blue Yonder, D-Box, Sobeys, CN, CAE, Banque Nationale, and Deloitte. And really what I do for a living is that training future UX researcher. The main idea is to bring real life research question from industry and to be able to train the graduate student at tackling real life problem that industry brings to us, and to address those within their master thesis or PhD thesis. So that the idea is that not doing fundamental research in a vacuum, but really to address real life complex problem, this very wide range of industrial partners that bring to us. One of the key elements is that to train future graduate with artifacts that are being developed by the field and being able to test them at the lab is something that is extremely valuable. I see on the call, for example, we have some of our collaborator from Desjardins. So this is an example of researcher from Desjardins collaborate with us. They have their business problem. They bring the interface. Our talented the students are being tasked on different projects and are learning beyond the courses where the training above and beyond the training that they get a real hands-on experience at tackling UX evaluation project and design project. So this is, I believe, at least in our philosophy, the main way to bring the scientific method, right? So the idea is to train future UX researcher at being able to use the scientific method at tackling industrial problem. On the next slide, I believe you have our group picture that we took last May. Unfortunately, we are not able to take a picture this year. We just launched last Friday our UX summer school. So the idea is that all the graduate student, undergrad that we have at the lab, we will have for the summer about 30 projects with about 50 grad students involved in different projects. So the idea is that during the summer, especially the summer, is it's the high season for our students, where they are involved with project partner, involved in designing the project, executing the project. A big part of, I believe, of our role is to train them on the soft skills. It's something to learn in books and in PowerPoint slide in a classroom, the theory of conducting UX research. But what is really key is to develop competency and having graduate being able to interact with the milieu and being able to understand the problem, propose solutions, propose testing plan to really address the real life problem. So that's it. That's what we do at HSA. We're very proud from our group, and we have. I'll be looking forward to hear your question. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Pierre. That was amazing. So I'm going to invite our next speaker, Mandeep.
Okay, I'm just going to set myself up. I'll be presenting in a sec.
Oh, you're just muted, Mandeep.
Sorry about that. Can someone, are we able to see my screen?
Yes, it's perfect. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Okay, so hi, my name is Mandeep. I'm a senior UX researcher at Shopify, and I have been here for almost 4 years now. And at Shopify, I work in an area that we call online store. And in that area, it's where our business owners, when they join Shopify or want to change the look and feel of their store, they come visit the online store and they get to think about their themes, their templates, the layout of their store, the kind of shopping experience that they want to provide for their customers. So that's the area that I work in. And I sit with a team virtually these days, which a team of designers, content strategists, product managers, developers. So what you see here is, as a researcher at Shopify, we tend to work in teams with people who have other kinds of expertise and other kinds of skills that they bring to the table. So in terms of my pathway to UX research, one thing that has just been a constant since I've been a teenager is I've always been interested in understanding people. And as a teen, that was, me thinking about psychology, interpreting dreams, trying to find meaning there. And then when I went on after high school to Cégep, I began to think about psychology, but then, hey, maybe philosophy is the way to understand people, because I found that with psychology, I wasn't able to answer the questions that I personally had. Things seemed to come back to the individual, or like to, biochemical, functions of the brain and so on. And I thought, how about humans in the world? How do humans think about things? So that's how I got to philosophy. But then the worldview of that felt really limited to me, having to think about, ancient Greek or some specific worldview from Western Europe. And it was also really abstract. So it was really hard for me to imagine the kind of concepts and examples that philosophers were communicating. And also, this is when I came across sociology and anthropology, and that was really exciting to me, thinking about humans interacting with each other, making their way around social systems, navigating cities, neighborhoods, families, economies, essentially social creatures grappling with rules, with contradictions, who are trying to create meaning by interacting with the world. So that's what led me to do a PhD at Simon Fraser University. I'm from Montreal. I studied at Concordia, but for my final graduate degree, I went out to Vancouver to Simon Fraser University, just because as an academic, you tend to go where the program is, or where a professor with the kind of ideas and concepts that you're interested in pursuing has expertise. So that's where I went. And then I wrote a dissertation, and that was about decision-making among healthcare consumers, the transformation of traditional medicine called Ayurveda, 5,000-year-old tradition from India, as it became mass-produced, as it became commercialized. And that resulted out of 15 months of fieldwork in urban India. So that was in New Delhi. So in terms of how this relates to UX research in a tech company, for example, what drives me at least is not, me being in love with technology or software or gadgets. In fact, tomorrow we're receiving a coffee bean grinder with 200 settings, and I'm very terrified with that prospect. But that's not what interests me about, the interest is not about technology, but it's about how humans interact with technology. What opportunities do we see ourselves with technology? What kind of tool is it for us? How do we use it to achieve our goals? So that, I think, is what drives a lot of people who want to do, UX research at a tech company, at a software company. So in terms of what anthropology is known for, its hallmark research method is ethnography. So basically, with ethnography, we get to think about, what do people do? And the way that you learn about what people do is by participant observation. So you can see what they're up to. Usually you're in the same social context as them. It's not as if they're coming to a laboratory or an artificial setting. So in my case, I had done a research project after my PhD on how physicians take care of patients and teach medical students. So how would I learn about that? I shadowed them in a hospital on the floor for 10 days. And then also we wonder about what people say, what do they make of the world? And the way that we learn about that is through interviews, unstructured or semi-structured. Semi-structured is you have a few key questions that you want to ask, and you let the participant drive the conversation. Unstructured, you really just let the participant drive the conversation and see where it goes and what kind of connections happen. And of course, what's also interesting is, what do people say about what they do? How do they explain what they get up to? Maybe it's different than what you thought when you were observing. So coming back to UX research, in day-to-day life at a place like Shopify, how I get to use something like this is definitely what people do, but I'm not so much checking out like what people do, what business owners do in their normal living environment. I'm not often going out to their offices or to their stores. I have done that sometimes, but with the nature of my research, it's quite sufficient to see what they do remotely on video, where we share a screen and let's say a classic thing, just have them go through a prototype for some usability testing. So see how they carry out tasks, what people say, what they think about the tasks they're carrying out, how they understand what's taking place. So that's how that happens right now. And I would not call that ethnography, but it is just qualitative research that's mostly based now on interviews. One thing that I would like to emphasize is for our UX research team, I know it's UX research, but it doesn't mean they need to have like advanced specialized training in research. We have people who come from all kinds of different backgrounds. A few of them are UX design, commerce. Let's say we studied commerce at university, customer care, accounting, engineering, psychology, and there's probably many others that I can't think of off the top of my head. So it's just like a whole bunch of different skills that help to create our UX research team. And we can talk about this after if we want, but I think it's a strength that we all bring our different perspectives to this, rather than having a very standardized way of becoming a researcher. In terms of skills or traits that I had that I came with into this role, one is just critical thinking. So if you break down some aspects of critical thinking, being able to observe, analyze, reflect, synthesize, bring things together. Second is curiosity. You need curiosity so you have the fuel or the endurance to dig into problems. You need curiosity so that way it's easy for you to ask, why is something happening? Lifelong learner. Things are changing really quickly in the world. New technologies are coming up. People are figuring out new ways to do things. So you want to keep up with this. I always feel like whenever I speak with people, as a researcher, I'm learning something from them. They're experts in what they're doing. So just always being prepared that there's a whole bunch of things that we don't know and we're going to have to figure it out. Comfort with ambiguity. So I think how this helps me as a researcher is that I'm not attached to any one outcome or less attached to it. So that way, when we are carrying out a study, I'm not too concerned with things going a certain way. So if I'm fine with things don't have to go a certain way, it allows me to see things that I wouldn't have noticed otherwise, because it kind of gives you blinders if you're really, expecting things to turn out a certain kind of way. So when you do research, you really have to be open to seeing the unexpected. In my background as an anthropologist, finding out things they didn't expect or coming across things that were a surprise, like that was a sign of a successful research project, not one in which it's like, okay, I ticked all the boxes, we found the answers. Having concrete answers seldom happens when you study anthropology. You come up with better questions, I guess, more focused questions. What I had to learn. Well, I had to learn about a new domain, commerce. As an anthropologist, I had some awareness, of like healthcare practices, some awareness of urban life in India. And now it was time to learn about, okay, what is this world of commerce? What is this world of software as a service, SaaS technologies, communication, new conventions for sharing information, the way in which information is shared among anthropologists in the academic setting. It's, it was certain kinds of articles. It was certain ways of presenting at conferences. But then at Shopify and other places in industry, it's quite different. The way that you organize your information, how visual it is, how long or short it is, or how in depth it goes. You have to think about those things. UX best practices. So as I mentioned before, I sit with a team that is, there's people coming from a lot of different kinds of backgrounds. So it helps to know a little bit about what are some best practices for UX so that you can keep up with what the team is doing, and so that when you make recommendations about something, you're able to use similar vocabulary. Had to learn about the product development cycle and the role of UX research, where it's most impactful, where it's less impactful, where you want to be, how you can anticipate people might use the information you have depending on where you are in the product development cycle. There's a lot of potential for impact at the beginning of a project, and then towards the end, what you can offer is more fine-tuning or tweaking or recommendations on user interface issues. So yeah, these are things I needed to learn, and I'm always learning them. There's always new UX best practices for me to learn, or foundational ones to keep up on. It's just an ongoing thing. But as you all saw, skills that some of us do come with as researchers, it is curiosity and lifelong learning. So it's better to have those and be able to figure out how to get familiar with these rather than the opposite. So yeah, a lifelong learner, that trait can be applied here to figure out the next step in your career. So that's the end of what I wanted to share about my pathway to UX research. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mandeep. That was great. Just a quick reminder to anyone that's just joined that we are recording, and we're asking that you turn off your microphone and your camera if you're not speaking, and save your questions until the Q&A. So we'll ask you to submit your questions for the panelists via the chat function or in Facebook comments, and then those will be delivered to the panelists via our moderator. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Chris Craigman, our next speaker.
Awesome, thanks, Sarah. So yeah, thanks for having me on this panel. I'm pretty excited. Yeah, my name's Chris. I'm actually based out of our office in Ottawa. So I was a little bit sad that I couldn't actually get to come and spend some time in our Montreal office. But yeah, I'm a member of our talent acquisition team, supporting specifically our UX group within Shopify. So I'm on a team of 4. We support all of our different offices and all the hiring that goes on. And so my kind of goal with the team that I work with is finding the right people, putting them in the right role at the right time. And I think now more than ever, that's like more important for us just because of everything that's going on. But I joined Shopify just over 2 years ago. It's been a pretty interesting journey, especially my background is in project management. And so what I did at the company I was with previously, sorry, I'm seeing the questions come up and I'm like wanting to jump in, but the company I was at previously, I got to work on a lot of projects that were very UX focused. So I worked with a lot of UXers, like designers, some researchers, UX copywriters, as well as UX developers. And so it kind of came to a point when I was there. I was there for just over 5 years, and we needed to help like build these teams. We didn't have any like recruitment process in place. We didn't have any like best practices for hiring. But we know we needed to build a really, strong team. So I kind of took on this side project to figure out, okay, how can we recruit at this company? While I was doing that, I was in touch with some people from Shopify that I knew that worked here. And they were like, Chris, would you want to come over and like do this kind of at scale with us? Because we're growing a lot. And initially, truthfully, like I was like, no, like recruiting is not for me. This is it's something that I can see myself doing. But I really like the way that Shopify kind of approaches it. We try to take a really human approach to hiring. It really is like looking at people kind of like Mandeep highlighted in one of her slides from various different backgrounds. Like you don't have to, you know, study research. You don't have to be a researcher kind of on the academic side. We do really value and we need people with various different backgrounds to come into our research team, especially at Shopify, because we're building this product for such a wide range of people. And so that really drew me to Shopify. Yeah, it's been a blast, you know, getting people in here and matching them up with their teams and whatnot. Yeah, I think one other thing too I want to flag that is pretty unique about this is I get to be very embedded with our UX team. So I'm very fortunate to kind of you know, see the different projects that we're working on, see how the different teams are set up, and then that allows us to help kind of grow these teams in a way that makes sense as well too. So yeah, really excited to answer any questions that anyone has. So definitely pop those in the chat or on Facebook. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Okay, I'm going to hand it over to Long. Thanks so much, Chris.
Thanks.
All right, thank you all of the speakers. So for the next 25 minutes, 25 to 30 minutes, we'll be doing a Q&A session with all of the speakers. So for the audience, if you guys have any questions for any of the speaker, feel free to send it over to us through Google Meet messages. So the way you do that is on the right, on the sidebar on the right, there's an icon that looks like a text messaging icon. So if you click on that, you'll be able to send over some questions. So we'll collect those questions and we'll pass those along to the speakers, right? So while we're waiting for the questions to come in, we're going to start with some questions that we have gathered prior to this meetup. Right, so let me see. Okay, so the first question is, how was your initial experience doing industry work, and what were the biggest challenges, and how did you tackle them? So maybe if Mandeep would like to start, and maybe if Pierre, if you have any insights and want to contribute, feel free to do that as well.
Okay. So in terms of initial challenges that came when I joined industry, I think part of it was just figuring out new systems, figuring out new rituals. One thing is compared to academia, industry is very much an oral culture. A lot of value just gets communicated in meetings and so on. So it's not about the research report you have that's sitting there that people will read into. It's really about like getting comfortable saying like points you need to say over and over again, even if you feel like I already said this before, don't have to say it again. So just like, yeah, the value that happens from oral communication is something that I had to learn. Figuring out where decisions got made and being around to see and to contribute to that, because I didn't know. So that was something that I just like, I guess just need to get transparency into how things work. As well as a bit of education. People get really excited about research. I think also just some education on when research is needed and when another way of getting the information you need apart from speaking with people. So just like how to be efficient and resourceful with getting information. Some things that helped me was just I had a very supportive manager who asked, first like what style of learning works best for me. So I got to think about that. Do I like to read things? Do I like to listen to things? Do I like to read books? Do I like to read blog articles? And then just sort of figuring out from there, okay, how do I go and level myself up and learn the skills that I want to learn?
Hi. My take on this is that I believe a lot in hands-on training where during the course of their university program, we need to find ways to train students with a real-life problem where they can have a safe space to learn and build competency in a context where there's a net to catch them if they fall, right? So in every different class that I teach and within the master's program, the idea is to place the learner, students, future UX professional, in a context where they get the chance to develop this competency before they graduate, and this is via real life problem. So for example, in my UX class every year, we organize a pro bono for UX evaluation, and we have about 20 companies who participate, specifically non-for-profit, hospital, healthcare providers, so that we provide UX evaluation to companies that may not have the budget to actually do it normally, and the students get this hands-on experience with projects, and what I believe, among other things, is learning to communicate with the client, and evolving, making sure to just putting together the mandate, and obviously understanding how the client can perspective can evolve over time, and so this whole communication with the customer cannot be learned in books or in PowerPoints, and I believe that active learning is the one thing that is very important in UX, so that when the student graduates, they have acquired competency that they can transfer to the industry.
All right, awesome, thank you. So the next question is for Pierre. Have you noticed an increase in female applicants and therefore students in recent years? And maybe Chris can chime in as well.
That's a very good question, and this is something. Just so you know, the governmental funding from Canada government has recently asked to report funding and to report gender equality, so that especially in engineering, if you go at Polytechnique, there's a high imbalance. And in UX, I would tell you that we have a very nice 50-50 representation of men and women, and it's a very interesting balance that we don't get. I graduated from Polytechnique in a program on ergonomics, and it used to be only male graduates, and I would actually report that at my lab we have about a 50-50 split. So yeah.
Yeah, and I guess just to add on to that, in terms of, I don't know if the question was directed at kind of applicants coming to Shopify, but I think I don't have any specific numbers on UX research specific, but I would say women in tech in general, like that's up. It keeps going, which is fantastic. I think UX as a whole, like I would say that's especially true. So UX research is obviously part of that. But yeah, definitely, like I would say there's been like a gradual increase over time. So yeah.
Okay, awesome. So the next question is about a portfolio for a UX researcher. So what is the relevance of a portfolio for a UX researcher? Any tips on what to focus or what recruiters are looking for?
That's a good question. I think, truthfully, for us, it really depends on, we have a lot of UX researchers. It really depends kind of on the team and what the needs are. So there's certain things that we'll look for. Sometimes we'll ask for more of just a casual presentation or a chat about some of the work that you've done. We try to be as upfront as possible with the roles that we post for. But I would say that the relevance of it is like we really want to get a sense of the work that you've done. If we're able to kind of see like, like your potential and what you can bring to the table, the more ways you can show that to us, I would say that the better. But we do recognize too, some people don't have a portfolio that's fully built up. So in terms of kind of building that up, there's a bunch of different things. Maybe I'll defer to Mandeep to kind of talk about ways that you could potentially build that up. But I mean, we have an internship program if you're someone that's starting out. We have a lot of groups like this, like coming to things like this, networking, chatting with our UX researchers. That helps a lot too.
I didn't have the experience in which I had a portfolio to go through. It was more a series of exercises that I carried out. But then in terms of like what I read online, and at this point, like my knowledge is as good as anyone else's, is basically there's a focus on the process, the thinking process that you're going through, and like highlighting why you made the decisions that you made. I think that's something that is of value to I assume recruiters like Chris when they're trying to figure out what's what you're a good fit for.
Okay, awesome. So I think this question is from Mandeep. How do you bring UX research culture into a company that wants to develop features fast and doesn't want to spend a lot of time on research?
Well, at Shopify, that isn't an issue that happens because we have a really great UX culture. We have a mature UX culture in which there is that kind of space given in which you get to figure out information you need before moving on to the next step. To me, I feel like there's a contradiction in that sentence between like UX research and shipping features fast. There's some kind of contradiction implied there. If people think that there is an opposition to that, it's like we either do research or we ship things quickly. One thing to think about is with research, it prevents you from making mistakes. So it actually does, make what you ship more effective later on, because there's nothing worse than putting something out in the world, but you actually don't know if it's going to be something that is worthwhile for your users. And then you're left with what? You're going back to the drawing board. So I think just having opportunity to test out, to explore the problem that you're looking into and to test out the ideas you have incrementally would actually save a lot of time and make things happen more efficiently.
Okay. All right, so Pierre and Mandeep each represent two contrasting approaches to UX research. The scientific lab in the case of Pierre and fieldwork for Mandeep, who mentioned her approach was not carried in the lab, but within the same context in which the users evolve, participant observation, basically. So it would be interesting hearing how Pierre perceives ethnographic methods and what Mandeep thinks about scientific lab research. Are both complementary? Are they mutually exclusive? Do you see the other approach as less valuable?
The answer is easy. I do all of these methods scientifically. The important element here is the scientific method is not. You have to choose the method according to the problem you're trying to solve. So we have labs, and we use lab whenever the problem fits the lab. I have projects where we do ethnographic, qualitative surveys, online surveys. It depends on the problem. So the idea is to not to be bound by a method, but to really understand what is the problem that needs to be solved and what is the best method to be able to bring insights in developing a product that your customer will want to use and reuse. We happen to have a lab, and definitely the lab brings a lot of very interesting benefits of being able to control environments. So there are very specific problem that requires a lab to really understand what is a problem and how to fix it. Sometimes we need to go in the wild and observe people and measure. Our angle is to use neuroscience and physiological measure, and we can go in the wild. And we did some recently a very cool experiment in a in a store at Videotron to measure the real experience of shopper at the store, observe them, but also measure physiologically the reaction. So at the end of the day, scientific method, choose the best method to answer the problem. It's all about the problem you're trying to solve.
Totally agree. It really just depends on the question you have, the problem you have, and the way of gathering data that is best suited for that. I don't believe there's the one method is better than the other. Two things that I do want to mention here is this is part of the job of a UX researcher, is figuring out the best method for the question at hand. And also, if possible, there's a lot of strength that comes from being able to triangulate your findings, if that's really important. So you can use like multiple ways of getting at the same problem, a qualitative approach, a quantitative approach, and that really helps to strengthen the insights that you have.
Yeah, I agree. Multi-method is a very interesting way, and being able to triangulate findings, empirical findings, qualitative findings, and observation brings like this 360 view on a problem, and sometimes very creative insights for solving the problem.
Okay. So speaking of research methods, there are a couple of questions around the technology that you are using for research. So what kind of technology do you use to validate your expectation? And so things like eye tracking, are you using eye tracking? Are you using neural evaluation during product development? And whether there are any kind of challenges to that?
I can start. The main idea is, again, multi-method, and to try to use the measurement according to the question and method that you've selected. We do have a lot of very interesting tools at the lab for precise measurement, and sometimes a problem require the equivalent of being a surgeon and to use surgical tools to solve the problem. Sometimes it requires some other qualitative insights or observational insights. So at the end of the day, it's really about the problem you're trying to solve. What I do believe, and this is like the premise of a lot of research I'm doing, is that a lot of what the participants' automatic and unconscious reaction during the interaction is unable to report. So part of my research is to identify emotion and cognitive and attentional issues that are below the consciousness of the user, and that, for example, in an interview, you would not be able to have a unbiased perspective about what was the real issue. So our approach is to be able to use both. And I like to say to my students that they must be able to handle very large data set, right? So to be data scientists at a big data level, but also to be able to be very good at qualitative and small samples when doing a small data collection. So at the end, it's a very unique domain where you need to be a quant and a qual at the same time, and you need to be both at them.
That's really awesome. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so the next question. What are some of the current challenges in UX research from your perspective, and where do you see UX research in the next few years?
Mandeep, do you want to start?
Sure. I think one thing we are seeing research ops coming up in a big way if you just keep track of what's happening in conferences and so on. So perhaps that's a sign that the field is getting mature. There's a lot of insights, and we need efficient ways to showcase them to people, to allow people to have access to them. So one is, there's all this research. How do we help people get access to these insights as needed? Other things, scaling research, teaching. I don't see this as a problem, but more just like research evolving. So there'll be research work that designers or content strategists can do, and then there'll be like other types of more foundational research that more experienced researchers can do. So just, researchers growing in their own way by doing different kinds of research, and then people in other domains being able to try research that way they're not blocked by, us not being available. So just more people being able to do it.
Where do I think it's going? I think the crisis created a very incredible opportunity. We need to at least see the positive in the situation. And unfortunately, my lab is closed, but it brought the challenge of having all my team to be all hands on deck to be able to start remote testing, which was not something we were doing because we had the benefit of having this very large lab. And to share with you where we're going right now, and it's like just some glimpse of the future, is that we're working on remote physiological testing. And we have designed over the past 8 weeks a new approach that I'm very, very optimistic about. And one thing that I envision being able to do, and that we wouldn't have expected to be able to do that in years, but the crisis made so that we had to put a lot of resource in this part, is to study habituation. And to do that, we need to be able to have physiological measurement at home. So we intend to create a panel of participants that we will be shipping physiological device at their place and asking them to participate in longitudinal studies to measure, among other things, the difficulty of learning a new interface. Sometimes when we do a test and we get just a chance to get a glimpse of what they think at using the first time, people learn fast and they get used to an interface, and being able to measure how people adapt and habituate over time and come over some of the pain point that we think as a UX researcher that they are pain point, but maybe after a few days they just disappear. So I think the crisis kind of changed a lot of our current research direction, created a lot of opportunity and innovation from our team, and I think we should be able by the end, next fall, to have this panel up and running and to study stuff that we could not have imagined being able to study in the so near future.
Okay. Yeah, remote physiological testing sounds really interesting.
You have it here tonight for the first time.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd love to learn more about how you do it. But okay, so there's one question for Chris, actually. So for hiring new talents, what are some of the non-research related things that you're usually looking for in a job candidate? And maybe others can chime in as well if you have.
Sure. So sorry, the question is, what non-research skills are we looking for in a candidate?
Yeah, I guess like soft skills.
Yeah. I think this is a really good question. And I think, Mandeep, you kind of touched on some of this, I think, in your presentation. But people that definitely have, I would say, like a growth mindset, that's huge for us. Things are always changing, and I don't think this relates specifically to research, but you see how fast the world is changing. Like, this relates to a lot of different companies, but with everything that's going on now, we've had to pivot, we've had to grow, we've had to adapt. And I think if you look at some of the people who have been most successful at Shopify, it's the ones that want to keep learning. I think you have to, it's so cheesy to say, but I truly believe it. You obviously have to be very passionate about this. You have to care, I think, what you're doing the research for. In our case, it's for our merchants, our users. So why are we getting this information? Why does it matter? Those are the kind of two main things that come to mind that would be more soft skills. But I think kind of the ability to, I would say, challenge each other too. So giving and receiving feedback. We talk a lot about, we talk a lot about having strong opinions loosely held. I feel like I'm just kind of spewing out phrases here, but I think that's something that's so important to us as well. So coming in, having your opinion, but also being very open to listening to others and hearing their thoughts as well, because that's how we're going to build the best product. That's how we're going to have kind of the strongest team. So yeah. I would say those are some things that come to mind.
I think just building on like an example of what Chris is saying is in terms of like, not being able to have different opinions. Sometimes before I go into meetings and I know that the team hasn't really involved in something and have a very deep knowledge, I'll just have to take a second to like think about a business owner that I've spoken with or an interview I've had, and just have that mindset when I go into it, just so I'm prepared just to ask questions that may sound a bit simple, may sound a bit basic, because we're actually creating this for someone that's using our product and they don't have that deep knowledge that we have. And it's like always good to like help people just get like out of the particular work they're focusing on and think about the whole workflow of someone using Shopify.
From my side, and obviously I'm not from the industry, so I'd like my industry colleague to confirm, but I like to tell my students that one very important competency is the ability to celebrate failure. Failure is, if we cannot fail and learn from failure fast, is science cannot advance and UX cannot progress, right? So we need to be able to, and this is very difficult to learn. You need a lot of modesty and a lot of empathy to be able to share openly when you fail, and being able to share and not point to anyone as being the problem, and to blame the problem, and then to be able to learn from the failure. I think it's a very, very important skill, very difficult to acquire, but very important of being able to create an environment where people can innovate. If you cannot celebrate failure, you cannot innovate.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for all of your insights. That was great. So the next question is for Mandeep. So if your stakeholders are having a hard time translating your research insights into action, how do you get over that roadblock as a UX researcher?
I think my answer is maybe a combination of what a researcher would do, but just also like maybe like my personal preferences for addressing a problem like this. So if my research insights are not convincingly communicated to a stakeholder, what would I do? Something that works for me is I might just try and have a one-on-one meeting with like the concerned stakeholder or something, just so that maybe we can have a conversation, go more in depth, do a deep dive into the research or questions they have. So that could be helpful. Another thing, it could just be to think about the way that this message was communicated and think of alternative ways. We have a bunch of teams at Shopify. With some teams, you can give a written document and that's fine, that gets read. With other teams, it's a group share out, and so you present things onto a deck. With another team, it could be a workshop where people want to go and like look at their raw data themselves. Another team, people are really inclined to want to come with you when you do these interviews and come take notes. So I think it really depends, but just like knowing about all these different options that people may want to do in terms of getting closer to the business owners. If you just like know a few examples, you can try and pull some out and to see if that would work.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So we're almost running out of time, so I'm gonna pull out one more question. So after you've gathered all the research data, what are the different ways you communicate or share the information effectively to other people?
I just went over some of them, so I'll just like see what else I have over there. So there was a group share through a presentation. Everyone's in a room together, and then they can answer questions that way. You can look at reports. You can just think about the style that the team has and try and adapt it that way. Some people like to create visuals that go up on the wall, and that way things are exposed to the rest of the team. Yeah, so those are just some examples. If others have other examples they can share.
Okay. Yeah, so we just ran out of time, so unfortunately. So again, we'd like to thank all of the speakers for attending the meetup today and giving us really great, awesome advice. And as a thank you, we actually have some gifts from local merchants in Montreal, and so we will follow up with you about that after the meetup. And for the audience, we'd like to thank all of you for attending the meetup today and asking really great questions also. And one thing that I want to say is that like the next UXR Circle meetup will be on August 6th. We're not sure what the topic will be yet, but if you have any ideas or would like to propose ideas for the meetup, feel free to let us know on Facebook or on other social channels. We do have a Facebook group. If you search for UXR Circle, you'll be able to see that. You can also email us directly. If this is your first time attending the meetup, make sure that you subscribe to our newsletters to get updates about future events. So our email is uxrcircle@gmail.com. But that's it. Thank you so much, and have a good rest of your evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.